Hey everybody, welcome back. It's MJ here, just plain fun. This is going to be a video about the Stanley No. 50 light combination plane. We're going to do kind of an introductory project, something simple. My wife brought home this hook setup to hang in one of the kids' rooms, and I looked at it and I said, I could make something like that out of wood for probably 10 times the cost and take, 5 times longer. So, why wouldn't we do that? Let me give you all an overview of what the project is going to look like, what the scope of the work is. This is a hunk of walnut that we're going to use. I'm going to show you all how I would put the bead down with the number 50 on that. This is what it's actually going to look like once the bead is done on the top and bottom. I did go ahead and test the stain as just a basic Minwax black cherry. Tested that out on a piece of scrap. And this is what just a couple of coats of that looks like. I might do one more coat. Naturally, before we get started, we're going to have to at least make sure that we've got a decent edge on our iron. We are going to use the 1/8 inch beading iron for this project. And let's go ahead and see if we can get a little edge on that. You're going to get varying opinions on what is required, but I think most folks can agree that you're going to start with flattening the back. I think sharpening is intensely personal, so it's a matter of what constitutes sharp for you and what is going to produce the results that you are after. Let's go ahead. This number 50 is the later style. It has the adjustment grooves on the back, and then it's got this little adjuster. This thing is worth its weight in gold for being able to adjust this thing. I don't know how much detail y'all would want me to go into on how to set this up. I think if you've got a number 50, you probably have a pretty good idea of how to do it. It's a lot like a number 45. The concept is the same as far as main body and skate and all that, and depth stops. In this particular case, like I said, this thing is worth its weight in gold. You can see the adjustment mechanism for how easy that is to adjust the iron there. And just like on the number 45, you're going to have it set up so that the skate and the main body will follow the iron down into the groove. You're going to have your depth stop here to ensure that you don't go any deeper than that right there. And of course, you're going to have your fence. This one does not have rosewood on it like the 45 does, and it seems to do okay without that. I haven't had a big issue with the metal, cutting into whatever I was working with. But that's your basic setup right there for this particular configuration and working on this particular side of the stock. And let's see how we do. If you've watched my video on the number 45, you know that we start on the far end in order to give the blade an idea of where we want it to go. And as you can see, we do not have the blade set deep enough. But I would rather have it too shallow and not bite as opposed to having it too deep and have it take a bite that I can't take back. Here's a close-up of that bead for you so that you can get a really good idea of what it looks like. As you can see, I've got the edge of the iron set all the way against the edge of the stock, and that is on purpose because I want to have a smaller part out here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually raise the depth stop up a little bit, and that's going to allow me to take it a little bit deeper. And so, for example, where I've got this little part right here that it might be a little bit less than ideal, once I go deeper, it's going to go ahead and clean that up. And if I didn't mention it before, of course, you do want to go with the grain. And you have to go with the grain on both sides. So once we get this side done, I'll show you all how I set it up for the other side. If I can just philosophize with y'all for a moment, y'all know that making mistakes is a part of woodworking. And I would venture a guess that when you're working with a combination plane, if you're going to have a blowout, if you're going to have a mistake, chances are it's going to be either at the end here or it's going to be at the, I guess, the start or the other end of the board. And so we're looking back here and this is one of the advantages, one of the two main reasons why I went ahead and put this on. One is because, you know, I can't go across the grain and cut this bead. Believe me, I tried. It doesn't work very well. And so by putting this corner on there like that, of course, it gives it a little bit more personality and it breaks it up so it makes it look better. But that also gives us a chance to hide that mistake. So if you do have some type of issue on the end where it doesn't turn out quite exactly like you want, then you go ahead and take that corner off, and then that's going to help you hide your mistakes, or your mistake. Because I know the experienced woodworkers watching this video know that, you know, what is it, half of woodworking is knowing how to cover up your mistakes or just make it a feature, right? As I mentioned, it is important to go with the grain on both sides, so I can't just flip the board around and then take the number 50 along that other end. I have to reset the plane up in order to do the other side. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back the fence off like so. Go ahead and take this opportunity to kind of clean my mess out a little bit. And we have to move the depth stop over to the other side, because now if I leave that depth stop over there, then it's really not going to serve any purpose because there's nothing for it to catch on. So I'm going to move the depth stop over to this side, and we're going to go ahead and set that. And other than that, it's just a matter of setting the fence like so, and we're going to set our 50 up on the other side, and the depth stop is going to function the same way as it did before. We're going to lay down the bead on the other side. We're going to be going with the grain, all that happy stuff. This is a good time to mention that the way this mechanism works, when you're tightening this down right here, this is what tightens the main body against the skate and holds the blade in place. When you go to tighten that down, when you make that last push, sometimes it has a tendency to push that blade forward. So keep that in mind. And when I say forward, I mean out, further out than what you may want it. So keep that in mind and make sure you watch that. You might almost have to sit it back a hair and then count on that thing moving it forward if your mechanism does that. Mine tends to do that. Just something to keep in mind. And also for your depth stop, in order to make sure that we're consistent on this from the side that we already did over to this side, you may have wanted to put a steel rule on there and measure that first, where you set the depth stop the first time and then where you set it the second time, in order to make sure that you have a consistent depth on both sides of that. You may notice that this is a little sharp, a little more jagged than what I would want it to be. I think I failed to hold the pressure the right way when I first got started up there, but let's go ahead and see if we can salvage that. So we have a bead on both sides. That's kind of what we're working with right there. And as you can see, the majority of this came out pretty good, pretty clean. I do have this one spot right here that will probably need some touch up, and then I've got this spot right here up near the front. And I'm prepared to go ahead and say that that was some kind of weird grain, where the grain, you know, switched directions or something. You know, maybe that's not the case. Maybe it was my technique or a combination of both. But overall, you know, we're going to call that a win. This is just a practice piece anyway, because this is the actual one right here. You know, done with the same number 50 with the same blade. And I'm overall pretty content with how this one turned out. And I guess referring back to that video that I did, if you watched it on the number 45, the combination plane challenge, you know, it goes back to that about, you know, putting in your reps, about just getting in the practice. So we're going to chalk this one up as a practice piece. And realistically, if I wanted to use this for something, I could always just lop that off there with the miter saw. It is actually a good idea to have your stock be longer than the piece that your final product. And that way, if you do have a little snafu like that, then you can just cut it off and still salvage it, whether you're doing that with an old school miter box or with your miter saw, depending on if you're unplugged or if you're hybrid. And for knocking off the corners, I just went with the Forstner bit on the drill press there. And I think what I'll do is, once I get my stain put on and get the hooks installed, I'll maybe do a follow-up video and show y'all what the final product looks like. Or maybe I'll just put it on my Facebook page, Just Plain Fun, the parts division. But speaking of putting in reps, this was my practice piece that I worked on earlier. Just practicing laying down some different beads there, going to different depths, setting it at different distances from the edge. And then, of course, practicing knocking off my corners. So, y'all know the deal. You can't beat some good old-fashioned practice. Like always, your feedback is welcome, so feel free to drop a comment here on YouTube or visit me over on Facebook. And I appreciate y'all watching, and I'll see you next time.